Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. As I sat in silence, the priest's voice filled the hall, honoring the memory of my best friend. But Grayson was more than just a friend to me. I had loved him deeply since those teenage years. And now he was gone, leaving me with so many things I'd never had the chance to say. We first met on my very first day of high school. Grayson was a ranch kid from the outskirts, while I was a city dweller. We'd attended different elementary schools, but since the county had only one high school, we ended up in the same class. By pure chance, we sat next to each other, and I was immediately drawn to his warm smile and rugged looks. Soon we were exchanging notes and stories, beginning a bond that would only grow stronger. In the following months, our connection solidified, and by Thanksgiving, we were nearly inseparable. Neither of us was especially interested in the school sports teams, but Grayson joined the rodeo team, a unique opportunity our school offered. By sophomore year, it was clear he had a natural talent for it. I attended every event, cheering him on with pride. I remember one particular day when he was thrown off a horse no one else dared to ride. Afterwards, I told him no one could have stayed on that horse. He looked at me, grinned, and said, "Charles, there's no horse you can't ride and no cowboy who can't be thrown." That was Grayson, resilient and fearless. When senior year came around, he received several scholarship offers from colleges with rodeo programs, but he declined. The events of September 11th had deeply affected him, and he felt a duty to serve. Despite my urging him otherwise, he enlisted in the Marines right after graduation, leaving our small town behind. While Grayson was serving, I started college, deciding to focus on banking. During breaks, I worked as a teller at the local bank. I wrote to him as often as I could, and he sent back replies, telling me about his life. College brought new experiences, freedoms, and plenty of temptations. At a party one night, I had my first romantic encounter, but I never told Grayson about it. I assumed he was out there, living it up with other Marines. When he finally returned, I was already working as an assistant bank manager and dating a girl I'd met in college. Grayson, on the other hand, was back to his bachelor life, occasionally dating women from our town. Just 6 months after his return, his parents were killed in a tragic car accident. As their only child, Grayson inherited their small ranch, debt-free, except for a $100,000 loan. At the time, he was dating Addison, a secretary at a local law firm. Rumors circulated about her affair with a married lawyer in her office, though whether Grayson knew or chose to ignore it was a mystery to me. Shortly after his parents' passing, the rumors intensified when Grayson and Addison suddenly left town and got married. I was crushed. I had always hoped that someday Grayson and I would find a way to be together. Still, we kept in touch, and I occasionally saw him in town with Addison, whose presence only fueled the gossip about her relationship with the married lawyer. I wrestled with whether to tell Grayson, but I feared he would see it as jealousy or try to dismiss my words. Then, one day, Grayson called with unexpected news. Addison was pregnant. 7 months later, they had a child. He invited me to lunch at a cafe, and I prepared myself to hear what this new chapter of life would bring him. Grayson invited me over to see photos of his newborn, and I agreed, wanting to support my old friend. We had been close for many years, and I still cared about him deeply. But as soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red and filled with pain. "What's going on, Grayson?" I asked, concerned. "Is everything okay with your wife and the baby?" "No, it's not okay!" he nearly shouted, handing me his phone. On the screen were pictures of his newborn, and it was immediately clear that the baby didn't resemble Grayson at all. "I'm desperate," he said, his voice trembling. "All I can think about is finding this man and making both of them pay for what they've done." "Wait, Grayson." I tried to calm him down. "Don't do anything rash. Let's think this through. When will Addison be discharged?" "Tomorrow," he whispered, struggling to keep his composure. "And has she already seen the baby?" I asked, trying to understand the situation. "She held him, even fed him while I was gone," he replied bitterly. When I asked her, She looked at me like I was out of my mind. She told me I just needed to accept it, that she had been with someone else, and now I would be raising that man's child. He continued, "She plans to come home tomorrow and expects to stay in our house. She even told me that if I want a divorce, I'll have to move out. Since we have a no-fault divorce law here, I'll be required to pay her alimony and child support, since the child was born in our marriage, even though he isn't mine." "How is that fair?" he asked, his voice full of despair. "She's the one who cheated." "Take a breath, Grayson," I advised, trying to help him calm down. "She even joked that I might end up paying for the kids' college someday," he added, his voice growing even more bitter. 18 years of support, and then she wants to sell the ranch and leave me with only half, assuming I'm still around by then. And she laughed as she said it. "Hold on, Grayson," I urged again. "Listen, she's probably been planning this for a long time, likely with some legal guidance. She works at a law firm, and there's one attorney there, a black man. I'd guess he's the father. He's probably advising her on what to say and do." Grayson listened, his anger cooling as I continued. "I'm not a lawyer, but it might be best for you to avoid being alone with her. If she claims you were abusive, it could make things worse for you. She could even have you arrested, giving her an advantage in the divorce. I'd offer you to stay with me, but that could lead to other issues," I added. "Let me make some calls and find a place where you can stay." I was able to arrange something for him, a bank-owned property with a small plot and an old barn. After we had lunch, I returned to the bank, and Grayson went home to pack up. By evening, he had moved to the new place, bringing along his horse. The next morning, when Addison was ready for him to pick her up from the hospital, Grayson instead came to my office. I helped him extend his ranch credit line to $800,000, which he withdrew in cash immediately. He rented a safe deposit box, but we decided to keep the money separate. Addison and the baby returned home by taxi, and her calls to Grayson went unanswered. Meanwhile, Grayson temporarily moved his cattle to a neighbor's pasture and sold them at auction a few days later. Eventually, Addison stopped calling him and filed for divorce. When she was served the papers, Grayson was already settled at his new location. At the first court hearing, Addison was represented by someone from her firm, but not the presumed father. Grayson, on the other hand, didn't appear in person. Instead, he sent one of my close friends, a lawyer from another city, who eagerly took on his case. Grayson was quickly cast as the villain. He had left his wife and their newborn, and the court ordered him to cover all expenses, including her legal fees. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned. Right before the first payment to his unfaithful wife was due, Grayson signed up for a charity ride organized by the sheriff. The event was a horseback fundraiser for a cause the sheriff supported. That morning, over 100 participants arrived. About 3 hours into the ride, they reached a river. Recent rains had caused the river to swell, and Grayson suggested the others wait while he crossed first to ensure it was safe. He was halfway across when disaster struck. Grayson's horse suddenly panicked. Some thought a snake might have startled it. Others suggested it could have been a floating log. Whatever the case, Grayson lost his balance and fell into the rushing waters. Later, the sheriff explained that the riverbed drops sharply just past the crossing point, and it was likely Grayson's boots filled with water, leading them to assume he had drowned. His body was never found. It was believed the current had swept him away. The search continued for 3 days before being called off, and Grayson was declared dead. And that brings us to the present. After the funeral, everyone gathered at Grayson's home, now Addison's home. As is customary, there was an abundance of food on the table. Friends came from all over, even some of his rodeo companions. One person in particular was especially vocal. "That preacher had no idea what he was talking about," he said. "Grayson never fell off a horse in his life. Maybe he got bucked a few times, but just falling off? Nonsense. I'd bet he was shot." Another friend interjected. "Come on, Samuel, that's ridiculous. I was there with the sheriff and 2 deputies. Nobody heard a gunshot." "It doesn't matter," Samuel insisted. "He was the best cowboy I ever knew. To die like that, it's just horrible." "Were you there, Charles?" someone asked. "What do you think?" I shook my head. "I didn't go this year. Had other matters that morning. Shame I wasn't there. Maybe I could have. The sheriff cut in. Enough! It all happened so fast. No one could have done anything. We searched, but he just vanished. I took the moment to slip away quietly. 2 days later, Addison and the father of her child stormed into the bank, furious. "What is this?" Addison demanded. "It can't be true that we owe $800,000 on this ranch. That's impossible." I calmly flipped through the documents, found the right one, and handed it to her lawyer, a man named Bob Taylor. He reviewed it for a few moments. "Everything's in order. It appears Grayson took out a loan against the ranch, $800,000, a few days after your child was born." Addison was livid. "How could he do that? The ranch was ours." "No, Addison," I clarified. "The ranch belonged solely to Grayson. His parents left it to him alone. His father originally set up the line of credit against the ranch, using it for cattle operations." Addison's irritation only grew. "Then where's the money?" she demanded. Her lawyer continued, "Did Grayson have any other accounts at this bank?" "Only one," I replied, "and it was a joint account with Addison and Grayson." The balance on her account had dwindled to less than $50, and Addison's patience was running thin. "What about the safety deposit box?" she demanded irritably. "Grayson has one," I replied. "Then open it." "That's where he hid the money," she insisted, her voice sharp and unyielding. I tried to keep my tone steady. "I'll need a court order for that." "Open it right now," she snapped, her anger only growing. "Addison, calm down. Let me handle this," I asked. "Since your divorce wasn't finalized, you were still legally married to him when he died." This reminder seemed to settle her a bit. Addison smirked, stood up, and left. But there was a complication. The judge wouldn't allow access to the box without Grayson's death certificate. Weeks went by, and another notice from the bank arrived, this time with a threat of eviction. Addison returned, now with a lawyer and a court order. I arranged for a locksmith, and together we opened the box. It was entirely empty. Addison was livid. "Where's the money? It couldn't have just disappeared. Can we look at the bank's security footage to see when Grayson took it? Maybe that will explain things." "That's not a problem," I replied, and we carefully reviewed the security footage. It showed Grayson at the teller window, where the teller counted the cash and placed it into 2 zippered bags. Grayson signed, entered the vault with a bank employee, and exited alone a few minutes later, leaving the bank with the bags in hand. So he left with the money. Where did he go after that? Addison asked in frustration, her irritation deepening. "The bank is taking my home. Where am I supposed to live now? It's your child. Find us a place to stay." "Addison, let's calm down," her companion tried, attempting to diffuse the tension. "Don't tell me to calm down," she shot back sharply. "This is all your fault. You promised me a home and land, and now I have nothing left." Her companion tried to take her by the hand to lead her out, but she pulled away. "Let go of me. I'll tell your wife everything," she threatened. But before she could finish, his hand swung and struck her so hard she collapsed to the floor. Without a backward glance, he stepped over her and left. A security guard rushed to help her just as the sheriff arrived, the one I had called when Addison began yelling about losing her home. Her lover was arrested and spent several nights in jail on assault and battery charges. A month later, his wife filed for divorce, and Grayson's house and land were repossessed by the bank. Rumors circulated that Addison had filed for child support from the father of her child and won the case. But shortly afterward, she and her lawyer disappeared from town. The lawyer lost his job and was disbarred for a year. By now, you may have guessed that Grayson was not actually dead. From his perspective, it was all a meticulously crafted plan, a scheme he believed was flawless. What real options did he have? Kill Addison and her lover? No, that was impossible. Pay child support to an unfaithful wife living in his home rent-free? Also no. And pay to support a child who wasn't his? Out of the question. I knew that he took part in an annual charity race, so I decided that would be the perfect time for him to vanish. When they reached the riverbank during the race, he halted the group. "I'll go first to check if it's safe," he announced. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.